Chapter 15. I remember you. When I opened my eyes again, I thought I was still asleep, still dreaming. I felt like I was floating, hovering just above my bed, looking down at the empty shell of my body. My surroundings were white and sterile, more like an examination room. The walls were bare, and the small window had their dark gray curtains drawn closely. It looked like they were sewn together. The door of the room was slightly ajar, and through the crack between it and the jamb came the only light, a dull yellowish glow. My bed smelled strongly of starch. The sheet was stiff and tucked tightly around me. Because my pillow was so soft, my head was barely raised. When I turned to look around the room, I saw there was a table with a long top drawer and a counter with some imitation wood beside the bed. On it was an ivory white bedpan and a metal bowl with a washcloth draped over the edge. When I tried to sit up, I was shocked to discover I was strapped down, thick belts of leather across the top of my body just under my breasts, my arms tucked against my sides, and another belt across my legs. I could barely move. It put a hot ball of panic in my stomach that rolled from side to side. "Help me," I cried. "Someone please?" I waited, but heard nothing. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I cried out again, waited, and cried out once more. The silence was maddening. Wasn't there anyone else here? My struggle against the straps was futile, even painful. I sighed deeply and gave up, closing my eyes and whimpering softly. I must have fallen asleep again because when I opened my eyes, I heard the water running in the sink. There was someone in my bathroom. "Who's there?" I called. Moments later, a tall, thin woman with rust-colored hair stepped out. I could see her shoulder bones outlined against her white uniform. She had long arms and very long hands and looked strong and capable. When she circled the bed and came across, I could see her face more clearly. She looked half asleep herself, her eyelids drooping so that they were barely two slits, revealing small hazel pupils. She reminded me of Mary Beth, and I wondered if she was suffering from anorexia too. If so, why wasn't she a patient instead of an employee? She didn't seem impressed with the fact I was awake. She moved around the room as if she'd been taking care of me for weeks and weeks. It made me wonder just how long I'd been here. "You have to sit up. I'm going to wash you down a bit," she mumbled. As she spoke, she avoided looking directly at me. "What happened to me?" I asked. "Why was I strapped into bed?" She paused and finally glanced at me. "I don't know," she said, and continued undoing the straps. "Can you sit up by yourself?" she asked. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My name is Claire." "You're in room 307, she said. "Can you sit up, please?" I thought hard and vaguely recalled the events that led to my being brought upstairs. "I need to see Dr. Sotheby," I said. "Can you tell him Laura Logan needs to see him as soon as possible? It's important." "I'm just a nurse's aide," she said. "I don't tell anyone anything." She began to wash my right hand with my arm, with as much interest as she would have washing a dirty dish. "I can do that myself," I said, anger rushing in to replace fear. Why was I strapped down in bed? Why can't I get up and walk around? Can't I take a shower or a bath? She kept washing and rinsing as if I hadn't said a word. My anger began to simmer, my blood rolling into a boil. "Can't you tell me anything?" I demanded, as forcefully as I could. She paused. "I have some meatloaf, mashed potatoes, peas, carrots, some bread, apple juice, and strawberry jello." "What?" "That's your supper," she said. "That's all I can tell you. That's all I know." She started on my other hand and arm, and I pulled it back abruptly. "I said I can wash myself." She held the cloth a moment, then she shrugged. "Here, do it and I'll get your food," she said, and dropped the cloth in my hand before turning to walk out the room. I put the cloth on my face and took a deep breath. I have to get out of here, I thought. I have to find Dr. Sotheby and get out of here. I put my legs over the bed and stood. My whole body swayed like a pendulum in a grandfather clock. Nevertheless, I turned to the closet, hoping to find my clothes. At the moment, I was wearing a loose hospital gown and was barefoot. The tile floor felt like ice beneath my feet. Taking a deep breath, I stepped away from the bed and walked into the closet. However, when I opened the door, I looked in at empty hangers. There were no clothes, no shoes, nothing but a layer of fine dust. "What are you doing out of bed? Get back in, quick, or I'll get fired," the tall woman cried. She had my tray of food in her hands and moved across the room to the table quickly. As I turned, she took hold of my arm to help me back. The room spun around me. Why am I so dizzy? What did they give me? My legs feel like rubber. I don't know anything about medicines. Just get in bed. Why don't you know anything if you work here? Where's the doctor? I need to talk to someone who knows something, I moaned. She practically lifted me into bed, tucking me the blanket. My head fell back against the pillow. "I'll crank the bed up for you," she said, and pushed a button and raised the bed so that my upper torso was in the seated position. Then she moved the tray in front of me. "Can you feed yourself, or do you want me to feed you?" "I can eat by myself," I said. "I can do everything for myself if you people will just let me." "Good. I got 2 other patients on this floor. Neither can do much for themselves. They can't even wipe their own noses most of the time, and they're not much older than you." She started away from the bed and then stopped and returned to fasten the straps over my legs. "Please, can't you leave them undone?" I asked. "You might fall out, and then I'll get fired," she said. "Why do you work here if they'll fire you for anything that happens?" I asked. She finally smiled. "It's a good job. They pay more than what I can make anywhere else. And that's just me and my mother now. She's too old to do anything for herself, and she doesn't get much social security." "How long have I been here? Can you at least tell me that?" I said. She shrugged. "Not more than a day, because I would have seen you before," she said. We heard the sound of footsteps in the hall. "Uh-oh," she said, her face whitening with fear. "That's Dr. Scallion making his rounds along with Mrs. Roundchild. She cracks the whip here." A woman of about 40, with her hair the color of pencil lead, turned into the doorway, a step ahead of Dr. Scallion. She had gray eyes with a narrow face and a full mouth and nose so straight it could be used as a ruler. She wore a dark blue cardigan sweater with pearl buttons over her uniform. I thought she had a nicely shaped figure and a rich complexion. However, all that was feminine and soft about her body was negated by the firmness in her lips and the piercing chill in her eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked Claire. "I'm just on my way to 304. I got her settled with dinner and, well then, get on with it. See to the others. They can't complain for themselves, you know." Her words were sharply pronounced with an English accent. "Yes, Mrs. Roundchild." "Wait! Why's that closet door open?" she demanded, nodding to it. "Closet door? Oh!" Claire looked at me, her eyes frantic. She reminded me of some small creature looking for a way to escape. "I was trying to find my clothes," I said. "I want to go back downstairs to see Dr. Scallion," I explained, turning my attention to him. "You will," he said, "soon." Mrs. Roundchild spun on Claire. "You let her get out of bed and open her closet?" "When I went to get her the food, she did it herself," Claire said. "You undid the straps and left the room?" Mrs. Roundchild practically lunged at Claire. "She wanted to wash herself, so I thought to save time I would go get her food, and—" "That's a demerit, Mrs. Carson. It'll go on your record. You know about our liabilities here, and you've been told what to do and what not to do. It clearly states on the door that this patient does not have off-bed privileges at the moment. I know, but there's no buts when it comes to regulations. You've been here long enough to know that. It's not our fault, I said. I insisted to wash myself. Mrs. Roundchild considered me. It's admirable that you want to take the blame, but it's not honest now, is it? Yes, it is, I said. Are you a liar? What? No, it was my fault. I told her I would wash myself. She knows that she's supposed to be in charge, not you. Why are you standing here, Claire? She swung around to look at the meek woman, paused in the doorway. I'm sorry, Claire whined and hurried out. Dr. Scallion approached the bed with Mrs. Roundchild right beside him. That's good, you're eating, he said, nodding at my food. I hadn't touched a morsel. I'm not hungry, I said. Dr. Scallion, why can't I go back downstairs? Why am I kept up here? You have to remain under strict observation for a while, Laura. Here you can get some personal treatment, he added and glanced at Mrs. Roundchild. I don't need personal treatment. I was doing fine until you wanted to start giving me some drug, I complained. First, it's not just some drug. I'm giving you something that is designed to keep you from being too anxious and having a bad reaction to returning to your memories, he explained calmly. Second, I really don't think that you're in the position to know what's best for you. He glanced at Mrs. Roundchild, who looked like she disapproved of his taking his time to defend his decision. I want my clothes, I moaned, and I don't want to be strapped in bed like this. The medications I'm giving you can have some side effects, Laura. They can disorient you sometimes. This is just to protect you. I feel like a prisoner, I cried, the tears gathering up under my lids, making my eyes watery and my vision hazy. You're not a prisoner, you're a patient, and we're here to help you get better. Mrs. Roundchild is one of the 2 specially trained head nurses that run this floor. I have the greatest confidence in her, and she'll see to all your needs. What's happening to me? I feel you're on the verge of a complete recuperation. My sense is that you could at any time remember the trauma, and when that happens, he continues, it'll be like being hit by a freight train. Believe me, I've seen situations similar to yours many, many times. His words frightened me. I settled back, my tension and resistance melting away. I saw that pleased him. He looked at Mrs. Roundchild, and she stepped forward, reaching down to bring up the button attached to a plastic wire. If you need any assistance, you press this, and someone will come in due time. But don't think that they will fall out of the ceiling. We're understaffed here, and people are always busy. Have patience, she warned, and we'll do our best to see that you're comfortable and safe. Can I at least have my arms free? I'd like to eat and drink water for myself or scratch myself when I itch, I said. I think that'll be okay as long as you promise not to undo the straps around your legs. That will guarantee you won't fall out of bed, Dr. Scallion said. What do you think, Mrs. Roundchild? I'd like to keep the top strap around her waist as well, at least until she's stronger, she added. Fine. All right, Laura? I nodded. What else could I do? If you undo them, Mrs. Roundchild threatened, we'll have to restrain your arms again. Dr. Scallion took my pulse and checked my chart dangling at the end of the bed. While he did, Mrs. Roundchild tightened the straps securely. Let's remain with the current pharmaceutical protocol, he told Mrs. Roundchild. Very good, doctor, she said. She looked as though she were going to salute him as well. He turned back to me. I'm going to let you rest now, but Mrs. Roundchild will keep a close eye on your condition. And if there's any dramatic changes, she'll inform me immediately, and I'll be here as soon as I can, he promised. Does Dr. Sotheby at least know what's happened to me? I asked softly. He didn't like the question and hardened his mouth and turned his eyes to granite. Dr. Sotheby knows you are now under my direct care. He has no concerns, he replied sharply. Just so you know, he added after a moment, Dr. Sotheby interned under me. He thinks of me as his mentor. Do you know what that means, mentor? Yes, I said, you were his teacher. More than that, Dr. Scallion was his idol, Mrs. Roundchild corrected. And rightly so, she finished. Dr. Scallion smiled at her, and the two of them left my room. I gazed down at the food, my appetite still gone. Nevertheless, I nibbled on some of the cold meatloaf, drank some juice, and lay back. A little over an hour later, Claire returned for the tray. I'm sorry I got you in trouble, I said. I got myself in trouble, she replied, took the tray and left without a word. 15 minutes later, I had to use the bedpan. I pushed the buzzer for it to be taken away, but no one appeared for more than a half hour. Finally, Mrs. Roundchild came with Claire right behind her. Empty that, she told her, nodding to the bedpan. Then she handed me a cup with 2 pills in it and gave me a glass of water. Your medication, she said firmly. Will it make me tired? I'm still so weak and tired from before, I complained. Your medication, she repeated, holding it out. Dr. Scallion wouldn't prescribe it if it wasn't necessary, Laura. I'm sorry to have to be so firm with you, but it's an awesome responsibility to care for people who don't care for themselves. I plucked the pills out of the cup and put them in my mouth while she hovered over, watching me swallow the water and the pills. She nodded. Good, she said. Claire returned the bedpan to the table and they left me. Never did I feel more alone, strapped down in a barren room with no one to talk to, nothing to look at, not even anything to read. I did truly feel like a criminal, then a patient. It was as if I was being punished, not helped. I listened hard, but the sounds I heard from the corridor were few and meaningless. There were no voices and little movement. If they were understaffed, why was there nothing going on? I had to close my eyes. The pills were working, I thought. They were making my eyelids heavy again. In moments I was asleep, and soon after I was dreaming. Wonderful familiar faces began to reappear, rising out of the darkness. My mother was smiling at me, and my father was looking at me with love in his eyes. A little hand reached for me. It was May, and she was afraid. My brother stepped up beside her. Her name seemed to be closer, my tongue struggling to form it. Come home, Laura, he said. Please come home. Laura, my mother called. Laura, come home. We need you back here, Laura, my father said. May was signing and crying. I struggled, twisted, and pulled against my straps in my sleep so violently that I woke myself in the middle of the night. My skin burned where I chafed my waist and my legs. I groaned and cried out. The door to my room was open and nearly closed completely, so that most of the dim light from the corridor was gone. I was alone in the dark. I closed my eyes again, drifting out. This time, I immediately felt a wave of cold ocean water wash over me. I gasped. There was a hand reaching up at the top of a head emerging from the water. I struggled to get a grip on that hand, and then I really felt something in my hand, and my eyes snapped open. Shh, I heard, and turned to see Lawrence kneeling at my bed. Lawrence, what are you doing here? Don't talk too loud, he said. I snuck up to see you. We heard what happened to you, and I tried to get information all day, but nobody knew and no one would say anything. Mary Beth and Lulu send their love. How did you get up here? I sat up until the strap cut into my waist. There's another stairway that's used to bring up supplies mainly. It's right near here. I didn't know what room you were in, of course. I checked 2 others before finding you. The chart on your door says they don't want you to be disturbed. Has something terrible happened to you, Laura? Have you remembered something horrible? Is that why they brought you up here? I told him what happened with Dr. Scallion and what he had done to me and why. I don't see why that meant you had to be brought up here, Lawrence commented. Neither do I. I want to go back downstairs and be with people and move around on my own. Did you tell him that? Yes, but he keeps saying that they're doing it to protect me, to ensure I don't hurt myself. I don't know why they can't protect you downstairs just as well, Lawrence said. I nodded. Anyway, at least I know where you are now. I'll come up and see you as much as I can, but it'll have to be at night. If I get caught, they'll lock me up someplace too, or ship me away like Megan. I can't believe you got up here. You know everything about this clinic, I said. He was barely visible in the dim light from the hallway, but I saw him smile. I've been here long enough to know every corner of this place, he said. Are you going to be all right? I'm scared, Lawrence, I said, holding on to his hand. I don't want to be here, and I'm frightened. What if Dr. Scallion's right? He's the head doctor, isn't he? They said even Dr. Sotheby learned from him. I don't know, but I don't want you to be frightened, Laura, Lawrence said softly. He rose and brought himself closer to me. I knew what courage it took for him to come up and see me, and how much of his own problem he had overcome. Thank you for coming up here, Lawrence. I want you to know that that means a lot to me, that you snuck up here to see me. I couldn't sleep thinking about you and worrying about you, he said. We heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone's coming, I whispered, and watched frantically as he crawled underneath my bed. Moments later, the door opened and Mrs. Roundchild stood silhouetted in the hallway light. She stared at me, and I closed my eyes and waited, praying she wouldn't come in. She stood there for the longest time, and then she left, closing the door behind her. Neither Lawrence nor I spoke or moved until we heard her footsteps die away. Finally, he got to his feet. That was close, I said. You better go. All right. I started to sob. I didn't want him to go. I felt more secure and more at ease with him holding my hand. He leaned toward me again, and I touched his face. His lips grew closer and closer until they met mine. It wasn't so much of a kiss as it was a brush of the lip, like a sigh. I wish I could stay with you all night, he whispered. I wish I could put my arms around you and hold you and protect you from your own fearful thoughts. When I'm with you like this, I don't think about myself and I don't get panicked, Laura. I need to be with you as much for myself as for you, he admitted. We're good for each other, Laura. I don't think I'm much good right now, Lawrence. I'm no better than an invalid. I can't even get off the bed or go to the bathroom. You'll get better, and I'll get better. You'll see, he promised. You've been so nice to me, Lawrence. I'm glad we got to know each other, I said. I hope we can get to love each other, he followed quickly. I think the darkness made him brave. It brought a smile to my face. He held his face close to mine for another moment, then he kissed me again. Only this time he held his lips to mine longer and made it into a real kiss. I moaned softly, desperate for a loving touch, for affection. He kissed me again, moving his lips over my cheeks and back to my lips. Then he kissed my forehead and held me. Robert, I said softly, my cheek against his chest. What did you say? He pulled back. I opened my eyes. What's wrong? I asked quietly. I thought you called me another name just now. I thought you said Robert. Neither of us moved a muscle. I searched my thoughts and waited, but it was as if a dark cloud had suddenly appeared, shutting away the light and enveloping me in darkness again. I don't know, I said, frustrated. I don't understand. I started to cry. You see, Dr. Scallion's right. I'm disturbed and too confused to be on my own. Don't, Laura, please. He wiped away my tear. We heard the sound of a cart being wheeled in the hallway, and we waited until it passed my room. "You better go," I whispered. "I'll be back tomorrow night," he promised, and he kissed me again. "Good night, Laura." "Good night," I said. He held my hand until he started away and had to let go. I watched him walk out the door and peer out, then he was gone. Moments afterward, alone in the dark and in a quiet room with my own thoughts for companionship, I had to wonder, had I dreamed Lauren's visit, or had he really been here? In the morning, I realized I must have cried most of the night because my pillow was soaked with my tears. I knew my dreams were full of sadness, but I couldn't remember the details of a single one. It was as if everything had been written in the sand, and as soon as I woke, the ocean came and watched each and every word, carrying them back into the depths of the sea. There was nothing to do but start all over. A different nurse aide brought me my breakfast. She was just as closed-mouthed as Claire and seemed even more afraid of doing anything wrong. All I learned about her was that her first name was Delia. She was a heavy black girl with very pretty ebony eyes. She wore her hair very short, which made her look even chubbier than she was, I thought. She emptied the bedpan, gave me fresh water, and helped me wash. "When can I take a bath or a shower? These sponge baths aren't enough." "I don't know," she said. "You have to ask the nurse." Just like Claire, Della avoided looking at me most of the time. She was in my room. It made me feel as if I were ugly or a hideous creature that no one could bear to look at. Dr. Scallion finally appeared late in the afternoon. He gazed at my chart and pulled up beside my bed. "I see that you had a restful 24 hours. That's good," he commented. "Restful? I woke with a soaked pillow, and my arms and legs are chapped from tossing all night." "Please, take these straps off. Please," I begged. He considered. "All right, I'll trust you to wash yourself." He scribbled something on his pad. "Now tell me about your memories. How are you doing on that score?" I described my visions. I gave him the one about the ocean and the waves and the hand coming up. "Your memory's returning, Laura. We're handling this right. I'm more convinced of that than ever. Continue to cooperate and take your medication and let your mind feel at ease. It won't be long before you walk out of here," he promised. However, with trauma threatening to make itself heard dramatically and completely, "I'd like to increase your medication a bit, just to play it safe," he added, and made another note. "Okay?" "Okay," I said, and he gave me the phoniest smile he had given me yet. "To reward you for your cooperation, I'm leaving instructions for you to be taken on a short walk through the halls so you can get some exercise. How's that?" "I'd like that," I said. At this point, I thought I'd like anything that resembled or suggested a normal life. "We'll do it before it's time for your next dosage of medicine, so you can be a little bit more alert." He rose. "We're in control of your problems rather than permitting them to control you. And as long as we keep it that way, we're on the right track," he concluded. Claire returned at the start of the late afternoon shift and announced that she'd been instructed to take me for a short walk. For that purpose, I was given a light blue cotton robe and a pair of cotton slippers. She undid my restraints and helped me put the robe on and slippers. "Maybe this was to help your appetite too." Then she bit her lip, as if she'd said something blasphemy. "I hope so," I said. "It's not because the food's terrible, I'm just not hungry." Imagining that the same people prepared the food for the tower. She helped me to my feet, and I was shaky at first. It was very different on this floor. The hallway was just as immaculate, but there were no paintings, no chairs, no windows. Instead, there was a glass double door through which I saw Mrs. Roundchild talking with another nurse. To the right, there was a sharp turn in the corridor. "What's around that way?" I asked. "At the very end of the corridor is the zombie ward," Claire said. "Zombie ward?" "The patients there don't talk except to scream or cry. Many of them just sit or stand for hours staring at nothing, shaking their arms or head madly. They've got to be fed and washed all the time. And there are young people in there who took many drugs and burned out their brains," she added. "How horrible. You're lucky compared to them," she said. We walked in that direction. After a while, Claire lessened her hold on me, and I took stronger steps. When we made the turn, I looked down the hallway and saw there was glass doors there too. I could make out some patients sitting in chairs and a couple of young women standing. "I'm not supposed to take you that far," Claire said, nodding towards the glass doors. I kept walking in the direction anyway. "You gotta turn back now, Laura," she said. Suddenly from the room to our right, we heard a loud crash and the sound of a bedpan slamming to the floor and a shrill scream. "Oh no, that's Sarah Richards again. Just wait here," she ordered and went into the room. I continued to walk toward the doors. As I drew closer, I thought I saw a familiar face. It intrigued me and I sped up. There, standing there with her wrists all wrapped in bandages and staring at the doorway, was Megan. Her mouth was open, drool seeping out down the sides. Her eyes were wide but vacant. "Megan," I whispered. Claire came up beside me and grabbed my elbow. "You can't be down here. Come on, let's go back, Laura." "But that's a friend of mine from downstairs, Megan Paxton. I thought she was being moved to some other hospital. What happened to her? She looks terrible." "I don't know, but if she's in there, it wasn't good. Please, let's get back before Mr. Roundchild catches us and gives me double demerits. When you reach 10, they fire you. Come on, Laura," she urged and turned me. I looked back as she walked. Megan seemed to recognize me. She lifted her arms and held them up, and then I thought she screamed. I couldn't hear anything. Maybe she wasn't making any sounds, but she was trying to scream. "Megan," I murmured. "You have to get back into your bed now," Claire said, as we rounded the turn half toward my room. Mrs. Roundchild was gazing our way suspiciously. "Poor Megan," I said. And then I wondered could that happen to me? Would I end up on the zombie ward too? Maybe no one gets better here. Maybe they all just end up locked away like zombies, or worse. "Time for your medicine," Mrs. Roundchild said, bursting into the room moments after Claire helped me into bed. She thrust the cup of pills at me. "I don't need them. I want to sleep tonight without them," I said. "You have to take your medicine. Besides, you told Dr. Scallion you would. Why are you being obstinate now?" "I'm afraid," I said. "Too many drugs might burn out my mind." "That's ridiculous. Who told you such a thing?" She turned to Claire, who was hurrying to clean the bathroom and leave. "No one told me," I said. "I'm just afraid." "I'll stand here all night if necessary until you take your medication, and if you don't, we'll have an IV hooked to your arm and we'll feed you intravenously," she warned. "But they make me so groggy. I'm already exhausted just from that little walk," I moaned. She held the pills out, her expression unchanging and unsympathetic. "Are you just going to take the pills voluntarily?" she flatly asked. Reluctantly, I took them from her. She watched me wash them down, her hands on her hips and her eyes beady. "Strap her in," she said. "But Dr. Scallion said I don't need to be strapped in. He promised," I cried. "As head nurse, I have to make the decisions on the spur of the moment if necessary. You just said walking made you tired, and I don't think you'll be safe tonight without being strapped in," she said. Look at my legs, how red they are, I said. That's nothing compared to what could happen to you if you fall on your face. Strap her in, she commanded. Claire moved quickly to obey her. I want to see Dr. Scallion, I demanded. He'll be here tomorrow at his usual hour. I want to see him now. Don't raise your voice at me, young lady. Your grandmother might be paying for your treatments and making big donations, but you're still a guest of this clinic. We don't take just anyone, no matter who they are, she said, and marched out of the room. Claire gave me a look of sympathy and then quickly followed after her. I want to see the doctor, I shouted as they nearly closed the door. No one returned or responded. Soon the pills began to take effect again. My eyes drooped and I felt weaker. It was a futile struggle against them. Sleep and remember, I thought. Sleep and remember who you are, and then you'll be fine. Vaguely, I thought about something Mrs. Roundchild had said, something about my grandmother. What did all that mean? That was my last conscious thought. I knew the dosage was considerably greater because I didn't wake up during the night. Lawrence had been in my room too. I knew because when I woke I found a tissue in my hand with the words "I love you, guess who" scribbled on it. It made me smile, but it also put fear in my heart because I was afraid someone would find it. So I quickly crumpled the tissue in a ball and put it in my bedpan. No one would want to look at it now, I thought. Dr. Scallion didn't come in to see me the entire day. I kept asking about him, but as usual, neither the nurse aide knew anything, and Mrs. Roundchild simply said, "He'll be here when he'll be here." The only thing I could count on regularly was my medication. They had me taking it twice now, once in the morning and once at night. The night dosage affected me just the way it had the night before. Soon after I took it, I was asleep, but this time my dream woke me, or at least I thought I woke. Once again, I saw a hand come out of the ocean, and then the head began to rise to the surface. When I saw his eyes, I started to scream. He was sinking again, and I was struggling to reach him. I heard his voice, and I heard him say, "Help me, Laura, help me. I want to be with you always. Help me, come to me." I felt his lips on my face and reached out to embrace him and cradle his head against my breast, where he could fall asleep safely. Just before morning, I woke with a start. I wasn't imagining it now. I did feel something against my breast, and I turned to see Lawrence's head resting on me, his body curled up beside me. "Lawrence," I cried. His eyes fluttered. "When did you come? I don't remember." "I was here, Laura. I've been here for hours and hours. They're giving me more medication, Lawrence. It makes me so tired. I'm afraid not to take it. I'm afraid of what might happen to me, Lawrence," I said, seizing his hand. Megan wasn't transferred to another hospital. She's here. She's in what they call the zombie ward. I saw her. She looks terrible." "Zombie ward? I know about that place. She's really that bad?" I almost didn't recognize her. She looked wild. She frightened me. "Oh, Lawrence," I muttered, what if that happens to me? What if the medicine and my dreams drive me mad? Don't let them put me in that place." He shook his head sharply. "Never. I'll never let them lock you away in there." "If only I remembered everything, they'd let me go," I said with a small sob. "I think it's happening, Laura. I heard you crying out in your sleep for someone you were losing. That must be your traumatic experience, the event that caused your illness." "You did? Who was it? Did I say his name?" He hesitated. "I'm afraid to tell you. After what you just told me, I'm afraid of doing something wrong," he said. "You've got to tell me. I can't stand this emptiness, this darkness, please. Whom did I cry for?" "It was the same name I heard you say before." I thought a moment. "I can't remember what I said before, Lawrence. The medicine they're giving me is turning my mind into mush. What name did I call out? You must tell me, Lawrence. I don't want to end up like Megan, please. Someone named Robert, he replied. The sound of his name took my breath away. I stared at Lawrence. I think it was someone you cared for very much, he said sadly. Yes, I said, seeing the darkness begin to retreat and the light begin to slip from behind the cloud of my memory. He is. And I knew that today I would remember everything. I was filled with mixed emotions, anxious, terrified, and yet hopeful it would mean the end of my ordeal. Finally, I would be free.